Hello and welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today I'm going to guide you step by step through the entire process of creating this beautiful waterfall design. Now, as always, to get started, you're going to need to grab all of the requirements in the description down below, which will be the canvas size, a wonderful little stencil guide to get you started, and the palette as well, plus anything else that you might need for today's tutorial. Now, this is a little bit of a longer one. It may be a little bit more challenging, but as always, as I mentioned, I'm going to guide you step by step. So make sure to trust that process from start to finish, and I promise you'll be able to create something just like this. Now, when you're done, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, or you can come and share them with my community over on Discord. And if you didn't already know, I post weekly tutorials here on my YouTube channel, but I also post 3 more exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters. And the catalogue sits at nearly 80. So if you want to get access to all of those tutorials, you can see the latest 3 now. Then hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. So with all that said, trust the process from start to finish, and let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, you're going to need to go ahead and add in the stencil guide that I've again provided in the description down below. And to do that, just simply download the PNG to your photos and then go to your options of actions, add, and then insert a photo. And that should then insert it onto the empty layer here. Now you can see here from my layers, I've got one layer with the stencil on and that's it. Now we'll get started by creating all the basic shapes. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to make sure all of our layers are underneath the stencil guide. And we're going to get started with the basics. So if we go ahead and go to our colors, we're going to grab this color here in the bottom right of the palette. We're going to drag and drop it onto the screen. That's going to be our sky color, which only technically occupies this tiny little bit of space up here. We're then going to go ahead and create, again, the rest of the basic shapes. So let's create a new layer. We'll go to our colors. The next shape we want to go ahead and create is the back set of mountains. So we're going to grab this color here at the bottom of that second column from the right. We're going to go to our brush library, and to do our basic shapes, we're going to go to calligraphy and the monoline brush. And if you want to see my stabilization, the brush is set to these settings here of streamline and stabilization. If we hit done, the size is just going to be set to 6%. The size isn't really necessary. And we're going to create this basic shape here. So we're going to come along this line here. You can add some nice sort of sharp drop-offs here and there and some fun different aesthetic. But what you need to do is somewhat go to this line here, this curved line here, and just roll the shape around to the left. It's going to look a bit messy for a moment. If we drag and drop the color in, that's that back set of hills. If we go to our layers and we create a new layer, go to our colors and we go ahead and grab this color here in the top right of the palette. We're going to create the second hill that sits in front of it. So for example, as long as I start below that swoops line, I'll start here and I'll go along this shape here, creating some, again, just sort of bumpy, rocky edges to it, go all the way around. And as long as you sort of grab your start point and go up towards like here, for example, again, drag and drop your color in, you're going to be good. Then go to your layers again, create another new layer, go to your colors. We'll go ahead and we're going to grab this bottom color here in that third column from the right. We're going to create another basic shape. So we're going to come along this line here and make our way down like so. And again, as long as we go down past that swoop line, we're good. And we can drag over to the left and drag and drop our color into that space. We're going to go ahead then and create the main body of rock here. So we're going to go to our colors. Going to grab the bottom color here in the fourth column from the right. And we're going to go ahead and just create this line here. So for a minute, I'm just going to turn off that last shape that we made. I'm going to create a new layer in front of it so that I can see my stencil guide. And we're going to go, first of all, along this edge here. So again, creating like a bit of a rocky surface. If you want to change it up, you can do. Now, when you get to here, you're technically in the waterfall area, which is like this occupied space here. We need to follow this line here all the way down to there. So we'll do exactly that. We're going to go ahead and start at the top. We'll just bring in some, again, to repeat myself, nice rocky, bumpy shapes just to go along here. If you can create nice little ledges, it will really help you later on with adding in our lighting. And with that, you can literally drag and drop your color into the whole bottom area and fill that all the way in. And if we go to our layers and turn on that one in behind, that's now occupied as well. So predominantly, a lot of this actually is in quite a dark space. Now we're not quite done with our basic shapes. So that last one we just made, the large one, just bring your opacity down a bit so we can see our stencil again. So just drop it to 60%, it's only temporary. Create a new layer. We're going to go ahead then and create two layers that occupy sort of a boundary line here. So this kind of blocks off our waterfall and hides everything. So this line here, we're going to go ahead with the exact same color that we just used. We're going to go down to where the water is, right down here at the bottom. Go along this line here, and again, this is a nice rocky area too. I'm going to bring that in on a bit of a flat plane, and then just bring that up and down here. Later on, we can always come back and adjust the shape if you want to, but a little something like that. Now, it only necessarily needs to somewhat go to here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here, just sort of swoop it down into the water, and then link up to that shape there. So this line here that you can see that's horizontal is your water line. And if you create this shape and then drag and drop your color in, it's going to act as a blocker. Now, just to make sure that this nicely sort of blends in, we're just going to go ahead and grab our eraser and tap on it and go to the option of airbrushing and soft brush. We're going to make sure that that's set to around about sort of 8%. And we're just going to erase this line a little bit here, just sort of blending this out, making sure one, it doesn't interfere with this waterfall here. And then just up here, it just blends into the rest of the rock face. That's all it needs to do. And down here, it will just eventually sort of run its way towards the water and just blend out naturally. A little something like that. So there's no sharp line there. It's just all about sort of fading it out. And you can lightly go over that edge if you need to take away a little bit more of it. Now we actually need to do exactly the same thing again. So we're going to create another new layer. Go back to your brush. And if we take a look at our stencil, we've got this line here, really basic quickly. That's the line that we need to occupy. So this one here. So take a look and try and find that line. And we're going to start down here underneath this one. It's all about sort of stacking your layers. So I'm trying to sort of save you that sort of process. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to create a really cool little ledge there. Make sure it's nice and sharp. Then I'm going to continue up here. Some nice slanted rock up here all the way up to the top. And then what we'll do is at the bottom of this line, we'll grab here and we'll just get really close to this line here. So that's going to be where the next waterfall comes in. So we're going to go up here all the way up to the top and then drag and drop your color in. And just like before, we'll grab our eraser, we'll tap on it, making sure it's still the soft airbrush, which it is. And then we're just going to go ahead and blend out the bottom here. Now the bottom doesn't really matter too much. It runs in behind what will be a rock anyway, so it's fine. It's more so this area here where we want it just to quite naturally blend into the waterfall. So I'm actually going to reduce the brush size down to about 4%. I need to keep a lot of its shape really. It's just a tiny bit of it just needs to just blend in. It's going to be a bit of a shadowed area later on anyway, but just take away that right hand side a little bit more, like so. And your waterfalls are going to run in through here, down through here, and then down here. And they're just going to act as nice little barriers and blockers. So we're going to go ahead then and we'll leave that like it is for a moment. We're going to create another new layer. We'll go to our colors. We're going to go ahead then and move into these rocks down here. So we're going to grab this color here in the bottom left of the palette. We're going to go back to our brush, making sure, of course, it is the monoline brush. And we're going to do it on the same layer for these two here, just to save yourself some layers. So we're going to bring in a rocky shape here, which of course runs down into the water, like so. And then we'll just bring that up here. Nice little sort of ledges and sort of angles that match up to the rocks that you made above will be great. Just create some sort of similarities in the rock in this area of landscape. Here we're going to then go up here, and then create like quite an angular rock. It's going to work out really nicely later on for our highlights. And just make sure your lines run nicely into each other. We'll go along here, create some fun shapes down to the bottom, and then drag and drop your color in. Now we'll go ahead and create one more basic shape, which is just here. So we're going to go to our layers and create a new layer and drag it underneath that last layer we just made. And then we're going to just bring in another rock just down here, like so, and then let that run all the way to the bottom so that you can drag and drop your color into that space. Now that is all of your basic shapes done. At this point, we're going to go ahead and work in the background area first. We're then going to make our way towards these rocks at the front so that those areas are done and we don't need to deal with them again in the future. And then we'll make our way into the main area in the center, which is where we're going to focus a lot of our time and attention. So we're going to go back to that basic big shape that we dropped to 60% and increase that back up to 100. Everything will disappear for a minute. So we'll go ahead and we'll start at the bottom down here. So we've got our sky. So we're going to go ahead. We've got this big layer here in the background. We're going to create a new layer in front of it. And we're going to add some clouds. we're going to go to our colors and we'll grab this color here in the bottom right of the middle of the far right column. We'll go to our brush, we'll change it to textures and Dove Lake, and the size will be set to 6%. And we're going to go ahead and just introduce some sort of yellowy tone in here. I love this sort of texture brush for clouds. You know it by now if you've seen some of my recent tutorials. We'll bring in like a cloud shape from the left or the right, pushing it over to the left. And then we'll introduce another one just up here and bring that in just a little bit like so. Keeping it really simple, we'll go to our smudge tool. We'll tap on the smudge tool and we're going to use airbrushing, the medium brush. The opacity is 70% and the size is set to 3. And we can then get in here and just like keep a little bit of that sort of quite solid shape on the edge, but ultimately then, you know, in some areas, just smudge it out, make it nice and soft and sort of diffused, a bit dehazed almost, and then push that off to the right and the left. I always like that sideways streaky look. So I'm pushing it up into certain areas where you can see there it starts to smudge quite a bit. We're pushing that up, creating a nice fuzzy exterior. But then on some occasions, I'm leaving it nice and sort of straight and just leaving it so that it's got a lot of texture to it. Nice sort of crispy edge. So again, if you've done a lot of my tutorials recently where I've been introducing clouds using the Dove Lake, you'll be bang on with this process. It's just a matter of smudging it up a little bit and into each other and then pushing it sideways. So we get that lovely streaky effect as if like the wind's catching the cloud and pushing it around. So there, this is great. Up here it's got some really lovely detail. I can push this sideways. I can get rid of kind of that last little bit that's on its own and really break that up. And I love, again, pushing it sideways. It just makes a really beautiful aesthetic, like so. And that's all we need to do back there. We're just going to keep it really, really simple. So we can actually go ahead and tap on our clouds and we can merge it down if you're concerned about your layers. Or you can swipe from left to right on both and group them together. In case you want to revisit them, you can just collapse that group down. Next, let's go ahead and work on the layer in front, which is that mountain on the left. Now, I'm going to turn off my stencil guide for a minute because we don't necessarily need that on anymore. So this shape here that's flashing, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of it. We'll tap on it and we'll clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the middle color in the second column from the right. Now our brush needs to be set to the option of painting, and we're going to use the turpentine brush. And we're going to mess around with a few different sizes, but 15% is the size to start with, and you can see the opacity set to 100. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to take a look at our shape, and I'm just going to sort of swoop in from here, creating like a top surface, and then maybe like another one here that somewhat runs into each other. And then once you've kind of got that top surface of land, you can then just create really simple kind of streaks that run down. And I want them to be quite sort of straight lined and quite varied from each other, but just as that top surface just runs off and falls down the side of the face of it, you just get something like this and leave little streaks. You can even run up the occasional one from the bottom if you like. I prefer it just coming from that top area, but I'm going to leave a little gap there between the two of those, and maybe I'll brighten up the right hand side a little bit more, trying to kind of separate the two as if they're kind of two separate spaces almost. And then the odd little streak back there, and it just needs to be as simple as that, with maybe the odd little one that runs like a little bit more of a horizontal angle just to create some sort of variation in the rock, like a little something like that. It's very experimental, this brush, so have some fun with it. I'm keeping the pressure nice and light. And then we're going to go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it also. Go to your colors and we're going to grab the top color in that second column from the right. And we're just going to sort of use this as a bit of a grassy color. Now I'm going to drop the size down to 8%. And I'm just going to somewhat just sort of coat over the top surface here. And then maybe a tiny little streak or two that just runs down. You see I nearly undid that. I want it to be quite minimal up there. So just a little something like this. Just sort of coating that top edge. And it doesn't need to come down very far. It's just a little something like this. Now that layer is actually done with. You can, if you want to, again, I'm always going to give you the option so you can pick which one you want to do. You can swipe from left to right on all three of these. You could go ahead and group it. And then if you want to, you can simply tap on the group here where it says new group and go to flatten, and that will merge three into one for you. Or you can pinch them together, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. But if you have a good layer count, you can simply close that group down. We're then going to move up a layer, which is the mountain-ish side here. That is going to follow exactly the same sort of pattern. So we're going to go to that layer. We're going to create a new layer in front of it. tap on it and clipping mask it. So we're going to go to our colors. We'll grab that middle color in the second column from the right again. And we're using the same brush, but I'm gonna keep it probably at the 8% mark. And we're now looking for these little ledges again where we're gonna create like a layer of sort of rock, like a flat surface-ish, something like that. I may do the same here, and maybe this one gets quite angular and really does kind of swoop up the side of this area here with then a couple of sort of scrapes down. So we want to kind of just make sure that comes off of the edge a little bit, a little something like this, a little something like that. And then again, we'll do the same here. We'll kind of just create some lovely big sort of streaks down here and just let the brush be super messy. I don't want you to sort of sit on this for too long. We're just going to create some, vertical kind of lines to show the verticality to this rocky sort of surface. And that's it. Just an inkling of all these things. That's all you really need sometimes. It's just a little something like this. Again, you can always come back to it if you want, as long as you just fill the layer in with that basic color yet again. Now the only thing I'm going to do with mine is I've gone right down to the bottom. The only thing I want to do is I want to grab my eraser and tap on it and use the soft airbrush. I'm going to increase the size up to about sort of 12% and just go left to right and kind of just blend this out at the bottom. I don't want there to be too much colour down here, but I want that sort of little bit of residue of the sort of brush to sit there. Likewise, I'll just kind of erase back in behind there a little bit as well. That should just add like a little bit of shading without having to do too much. So again, you can swipe from left to right on both of these. You can merge them together, you can group them together, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. We're moving on to the next shape, which is this one over here, and we're going to create a new layer in front of it. So it's this shape here, you can see flashing. We'll create a new layer and tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here. It's the middle of the third column from the right. Same brush, same approach really. So the only thing is, because the lighting's coming from left to right shortly towards the latter stages of this tutorial, this is not going to get quite so much attention. So we kind of want to just sort of add in like little sort of streaks like this off the edge of the rock, keeping it really, really minimal. Maybe like the odd sort of ledge and stuff like that to kind of just show that there is a little something, but we're keeping it really quite minimal here. Don't worry if you add too much, we can just do the soft airbrush trick like we did a second ago, but just a little bit where the lighting's just catching on the ledge, but not quite enough. And that's all we need to really do here. We could maybe introduce like a couple more sort of streaks. See, you can always mess around and add some additional ones, but as long as we keep it a little bit more towards that right side. And I'll add in a couple more sort of vertical streaks as well. And that's probably one too many. So let's go to our eraser again, and we'll go ahead and we'll blend out that bottom area, just trying to feather it out, like the lighting just wraps around into here and there's not a lot going on. So about 5% brush size now, and I'll just sort of blend that out. And this little blending motion now just really like keeps that light to that right hand side. And again, that's all we need to do here. Now, if we go to our layers, we can swipe from left to right on both of those, group them together, and you can make the call again. At the end of the day, if you run out of layers towards the end, you can always come back to these groups and flatten them down. Now, I want to go ahead and jump to these rocks here because they follow exactly the same sort of principles before we get into the main sort of cheese in the middle. So if we go up to our layers, we've got the two rocks here. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of it, tap on it and clipping mask it. We're also going to turn off this rock underneath, which is this one that occupies this space here. I want you to be able to see the edge of this rock. So I've turned it off. And then we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the blue here in the middle of that far left column. We're going to make sure our layer is the one that's clipped, and it is still. And we can use the turpentine at probably like 15%. And we're going to go ahead and add in some lighting on here. Now this beautiful shape here, I'm going to go ahead and really sort of swoop in some blue here. And then I'll brighten up that top surface, giving it like a flat edge. And this is really ultimately what we're kind of aiming for, like big sort of flat surfaces, couple of streaks that kind of run up into each other. Ultimately, you want this top surface to be the one that's like majority colored in. And then you could bring in like the odd little sort of smaller streak on that side. So the blue might be a little bit hard to see on camera, but I'm just going to bring in another one just running around here. And then maybe another sort of swooping line here too. Keeping it pretty simple stuff. And again, just block in this area here on the left. Now we will work on this rock as well. So I can see I've got this kind of like ledge here. So I'm just going to sort of bring that in, make that kind of look like a big, larger, flatter surface. And then maybe we sort of streak down here too. And bring in a few additional sort of streaks over on the left. And then you can just use your imagination to maybe create like a few that just run up from the bottom surface of the water. I've got this little bit that sticks out as well, so let's maybe make that into a bit of a ledge. Let's maybe reduce that size down. I've got a 3% marker there. This is quite a small size now, and I can just sort of add in like a little bit of a ledge there. I'll go back to the 8% and let's go ahead and just like introduce maybe a little sort of scrape or two down that edge there. Just highlighting sort of the basic shapes of the rock, nothing too much. There's not a lot of lighting in here. You can see I'm just adding in a little bit of extra sort of streaks here, and then I think I don't want to overdo it, so I'm just cautious of, just a little extra one here, and that's it. Now we've actually got two colors to occupy these spaces, so we're going to go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it also, and go to your colors and grab the one in the top left of the palette. And we're just adding in a larger size now, again, sort of a 15%. We're adding in this is more essentially like a highlight color. So where is the lighting really hitting? So I'm imagining, like right on this top surface, it's a little bit of lighting hitting there. And then, a couple of sort of streaks up here, just a couple of extra sort of ledges, keeping it really light with my pressure, just allowing sort of the brush to dictate where that color sits. And I'm pretty happy with that. I love that. That random little streak looks great. And we'll just think about maybe just adding in a little something back here. In fact, just a little something back here, and then maybe like the odd sort of area there that's getting a bit more color. Let's maybe just try and see if we can get like a larger streak in there. I think we'll leave it like that. And we'll move over to this one here on the left, and we'll just add in like a little bit of sort of color on this side here. Maybe on this top ledge here, just a little bit of color, maybe a tiny bit down there on the end. And we won't add anything in there because it's definitely in the shadows. Just a little something like that, just to brighten up that surface, adding in a bit more color. And again, as always, we can come back to it if we want to. Now, if we go to our layers, we can turn on that layer we turned off. And again, just like before, the two clip layers to these rocks, swipe from left to right on them, group them together if you need to, collapse the group down. Now we're going to go ahead and grab that rock there that we turned off, which is just over here on the right. We're going to do exactly the same. We'll create a new layer in front of it, tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the middle color in the first column. We'll go back to our 15% brush size. Now with this one, it's going to end up in the lighting. So we do need to sort of think about adding in more than the others essentially. So I'm going to create like a little bit of a surface here to start with. So that's going to be like a lovely big flat plane, and another one at the top here. And then I'm going to somewhat try and just sort of like link these two together. So like a big sort of swooping line between them like so. We'll bring those two areas together and just swoop off a few other little lines off from there. Again, just like before, just the odd little sort of scrape in between just adds in a little bit more texture. And then up here, we'll also go ahead and do the same, where they're just swooping up towards that next tier of rock. And we'll go ahead and then maybe just introduce like a couple of sort of scrapes here. And they're just areas that are facing that light source yet again. So we'll leave that as is. We'll go to our layers and create another new layer. We'll tap on it and we will clipping mask it also. And we'll go to our colors. And again, we will use that one in the top left. And we'll add in some additional further areas of color. Again, this is going to end up in the lighting later on. So essentially, we're going to just almost draw over the majority of what we just did, but with this lovely brighter tone, and just trying to be a bit braver with it and a bit bolder. So like really adding in some color on these ledges. You can reduce the brush size down to that 8% if you want to get into a particular smaller area and really add in some extra details. So totally up to you. Just occasional little lines here and there just roughs up the surface a bit more. A little something like so. And I'm pretty happy with that. So what we'll do is we'll go to our layers. Again, we'll swipe from left to right on those and we'll group that together. Again, collapse the group down when you're done. So at this point, we can now start to get into the main area. We've got all of these sort of areas ready to go. Now, if we go to our layers, we're going to go ahead and we've got the main bulk shape here. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer in front of it. We'll tap on it and we'll clipping mask it just in case. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the bottom color here in the 5th column. We're going to use our brush and we're going to change it to airbrushing and the soft brush. Opacity is 100% and the size is too large. We'll reduce that down to about 7%. Now what you're going to do at this point is we're going to add in what are essentially the basic areas, and it's almost like a blue color that we can just start to plan out our waterfall from. Now, if we actually go to our layers and we turn on our stencil guide at the top and we tap on it and we invert it to white, if we go ahead and just maybe reduce that down to about sort of 40%, so you can see it on screen still. If we go back to that layer that we just created, that we clipped to the main shape, we can see a few different areas that the water is going to occupy, and we're going to go left to right down here, and we're just sort of adding in a base kind of color. So up towards this line here, we're going to sort of go left to right. Just think about just adding in like a block of color. You can really blue it out down here at the bottom. I'm going to increase the brush size for a moment to about 10%, and then get a bit braver here on the left, just creating like circular motion here of like watery mist. And again, in these gaps here, that's fine too. Now, notice how, for example, if I draw in really heavily here, we actually start to reveal this shape here that we've actually blocked in. And again, that acts as that barrier, which is going to be really helpful later on. We're going to go ahead then and just sort of block in down here. Now, technically, this set of lines here that are parallel to each other are a waterfall, and that runs all the way down into this area down here. And we're going to reduce the brush size down to about sort of 4% and just go up and down that. So we're following the sort of the shapes that I provided. So we're going to come down in a bit of a sort of vertical fashion here, leave little gaps here and there, that's fine. And it's really, really subtle, you can see on camera. And then it hits like another ledge, and then it sort of spews out from there and then just comes down, and then here as well. And again, I'm now revealing this shape here that we created as well. So I can see that shape coming into play, and then it flattens out yet again. This one's almost like it trickles down the side of the rock face. It's not quite a waterfall where it's a bit like aggressive. This one's really just sort of trickling its way down, and then I'm pushing that blue, and you can see that basic shape there. There is another waterfall that occupies here. I've just sort of blocked that in quickly for you, but we're going to go ahead and just again just kind of vertically just bringing in that blue and a bit of a basic shape to start with, and letting that go all the way down towards the bottom. And you can get as close to that shape as you can. And again, that shape's now fully revealed. And that's why we feathered it out, so that now it's just quite natural. This almost like sticks out from the rock, and then the water runs up as far as it can, and it gets towards the bottom here. We've then got this waterfall as well. So this is our main focal point, and it kind of just sort of swoops its way outwards. We're creating a bit of a curve where it's going at like a bit of an angle to us, and we're going to create sort of the basic shape. We can leave tiny gaps, but this is like a base shape essentially, or a base blocking in of color. So we want to maybe leave the odd tiny little patch of like darker color, but ultimately it needs to be somewhat blue. And it's going to come through here, and it's going to then just fall off, of course, down into here. We can get right up against this rock and just really add in some lovely blue that just like gets right up close to it. I'm probably going to feather this out later on, but for a minute we'll get right up in behind that shape that we created, like the waterfall crashes in from behind it. And then as we get further up here, I want to imagine that it gets a little bit sort of vertical here as well. I'm just going to block that in, and then just somewhat just trickles up in behind that rock here. So you can see that line there. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my stencil guide for a minute because you don't really need it on, but you can just about see then that there's like a little bit of blue, and then it just stops. We can't see it anymore, it's out of view. And that's a really handy thing when you draw in something like this, to have things that obscure starts and ends of things. You know, you can really let the shapes help you sort of hide things, and you don't need to see where it comes from or anything like that. You just need to know sort of, you know, what it is, and as long as you can tell it's a waterfall, you can understand, well, it comes in from somewhere. Maybe it's a hole in the rock or something like that. And again, I'm going to go back to my brush and just increase that up to about 9%, and just bring up a little bit more blue down here, just a bit more mist. We can't do that here just yet because this one is a little bit in the way. So what we'll do is we'll just for a moment just pretend like we can, because in case we get rid of it later on, that blue will be in behind. So I'm just going to add in a bit more color there. Now, once you've got this all blocked in, I'm going to just chunk that out a bit more, in fact, just really block in that color. And I think over here, we could probably leave that a little bit darker, because this one here is going to be getting that light that comes through, and these ones here are going to be hidden by this ledge and this ledge. So they're going to be a little bit darker. Now, the other thing we'll do is we'll go to our colors. We'll go ahead and we'll grab this color here. It's at the bottom of the fourth column with a very sort of light amount of pressure and about a 6% brush size. Down here, we're just going to just very lightly, really lightly, just sort of randomly sort of splash in a little couple of areas of this lighter color, and then maybe also like a little bit that runs in behind here as well, keeping it really, really gentle with your color. Just adding in sort of random areas of color, and likewise we'll also add some as well up here. So just at the base of this kind of waterfall up here, we'll add in a little bit of this sort of brighter tone. Now we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to move up to the middle color here in the 5th column, and we're going to do it on the same layer. We're going to keep our brush size a little bit smaller now, maybe around about sort of the 4% mark. It'll probably fluctuate between like a 4 and a 2. So let's just go for a 3 to start with. And we're going to start to think about defining some of the shapes. So for example, an easy one to start with is this area of the waterfall. You can imagine the water coming down here and then creating like a long trail. And that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to create all these little trails. So like a little something in here too. And then less will be more. Please don't overdo this. So just really think about sort of less is more. We're just creating the general flow of water. So a little something like this. And then another one that's quite loose here, for example. A little streak down into the water. We'll reduce the brush size maybe down to a 2% so we can add in some like different variated lines. So like maybe it hits a rock and shoots out this way, for example, and doesn't go too far. And again, I'm keeping the pressure a little bit light so I can just be in control and really boost it where I feel is necessary. And then, other lines that run in slightly different angles to it is fine. We can bring in the vertical lines, and another one that kind of, we want to think about it coming off that flat surface there and then just falling off, running down into here and creating some really, just crossing a little bit of the lines will look nice. It just shows that water's going in different directions to each other. Maybe we introduce another one that runs up into here. Again, vary your brush size if you want. I'll go up to like a 3% now and think about maybe sort of brightening up this area here. So just really showing that sort of quite aggravated water that's now about to fall off the top here. Block that in a bit more and then just let that just sink off. And if you overlap your lines a few more times, you'll end up with some nice variation in the colors as well. So some nice light strokes just build up on top of each other. Here we'll then just sort of again imagine that the water is crashing down a bit. I'm going to reduce that brush size down to 2% again and just bring in some lines here. Just imagining how the flow and the velocity of this is making its way down, and just a little bit in behind here is enough. And then you can make a couple more like horizontal lines to kind of show if it's a bit of a flatter surface, and then just let that fall off from there. And I'll streak in there too. And we're going to repeat that everywhere else on the other waterfalls too. But what I want to do as well, while we've got the opportunity, is we're also going to define how it lands down here. For example, where we have sort of this edge here, I want to go sort of horizontal here, where the waterfall crashes down. I imagine that essentially there's like a ledge here, and it goes in this direction here, and then it falls down here, and then it just drifts through the canyon or whatever it is over in this direction. So we want to try and explain that to someone looking at this. And let's also imagine that this rock's somewhat in the middle, and maybe it's just on its own. So the water can also go like this way and in behind it that way. And then it makes a decision, like, does it go this way? So there's lots of little things that we can try and sort of show the person looking at this and try and explain to them, this is how we're imagining the water's moving. So for example, we can, create little sort of a guide line here to start with first, and then just show it just falling off. And you don't want to make it too high, but you also kind of want to vary the heights. Maybe this is a little bit closer to us, so therefore we can, make this one a little bit higher. And this doesn't need to be super detailed. Again, it's kind of like a flow. We're creating the flow now of how the water flows through this scene that we're creating, and how does it just make its way towards the bottom and along all these little surfaces and flow, just to flow all the way through the design. And then over here, we're just going to continue on some of these lines and make them like here, for example. I've just let that sort of come across here and then kind of dip down. It kind of goes like here, so that there's an uneven surface in some aspect, and then it just runs away. And sometimes it's by fluke, and that's fine. Like, it's going to create the randomness of life, as I occasionally say in my tutorials. And then you can create the odd sort of line as well that kind of runs in a slightly different angle where it slides off of the ledge down into the water at a slightly different angle. And we'll do a few more in here. And you can maybe make this kind of look as if the water's pointing this way, you know, like it kind of dips down into like a groove here. And you can do that by kind of like pushing this in here and then just let that fall off. So we maybe don't want to block it in too much, but just a few more sort of streaks in there. And then it falls off into here, joins in this space. And of course, we can also then sort of show, well, we can brighten up this area here. Well, we'll call it the crease where the water meets each other. And then we can just sort of bring in some areas of just sort of streaky water. They don't all have to be perfectly horizontal. It's just going to sort of go left to right, just creating in some sort of basic water. So we're going to repeat that here and here, and we've kind of then got all of our basic, again, flow of our water. So I'm going to fluctuate again between a 4 and a 2% brush size, and we'll get started with adding in another waterfall here. So let's get this one in first, and then think about how does it angle outwards. So again, I'm imagining there's a flat surface there, just like our little rock here. So it kind of goes a little bit flatter and then falls off and then just makes its way down, of course, down towards that kind of lake at the bottom area. And then you can let the odd one sort of maybe sort of kick out from like here, for example. You know, that will just make it look like the water's crashing down onto like another ledge, like a mini one inside the waterfall, and then it just sort of streaks out from there. We want to make sure these lines run relatively kind of bold down towards the water. I'm going to occasionally then consider, you know, changing up the size of the brush down to like a 2% and then trying to be a bit more sort of purposeful. And then here, you know, I'm going to follow that story I just sort of created and kind of create some flick offs from it where the water really does just break off on its own, crashing down, and little sort of random sort of white spots in here, again, to me always look like, when you have a bright line like this, it really does look like the water crashes down onto like something uneven under the surface. Maybe this one's, you know, a little bit smoother, or it's a vertical drop and there's a cave underneath, so it just falls down in a vertical fashion. But this one here, it's just tumbling down the rocks. Have some fun with it, just creating this sort of concept of, you know, how does it make its way down. So if it's falling down on sort of a surface, it will hit every nook and cranny on its way down. And then if it's, again, a cave underneath, perhaps it doesn't, and it just has a nice, perfectly clean drop, you know, something much more even and much more sort of perfect. We're going to just flick these extra little lines off like so. And maybe while we're here, we just go with a 4% and very lightly just sort of create a bit more mist on this ledge here where it's falling down again. Let's change our brush size to about sort of a 2 or 3% again, and, you know, just let this sort of tumble down into here, and, you know, maybe it sort of curves out a bit as well. And again, similar kind of fashion, just hits another ledge and then falls off. So we'll do exactly the same over here. We'll make our brush size around about that 3% mark, and we'll go ahead and just bring in, you know, some extra waterfall lines here. Now this one's going to end up in the shade, so don't stress over this one quite as much. It's going to end up in the shade, and it's just like I imagine it's almost like there's excess, there's too much water, and then it's just created this additional spill off. I'm going to change the brush size between, again, 3 and 4%. I've gone for a larger one now, and again, let that sort of hit little random ledges a bit more, and like, you know, punch that out with the color, make it a little bit brighter here and there, and let it show that the water is trickling down. It makes its way down towards the bottom here. Beautiful little waterfall. I'm pushing it in towards the left hand side. I want everything to have that kind of left facing look to it. And that is your basic shape of your flow of your water. You never want to sort of spend too much time getting straight into detail. You want to get a plan. How does it work? How does it flow? How does it move? Let's then think about maybe down here as well, just kind of adding in a little bit of extra white down here where the water crashes down, and maybe a couple of random sort of areas here. Let's undo that one, make it a little bit more sort of blocky. Just kind of just block that in a bit more. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the top color here in the 5th column. We're going to go to our layers and we're going to create a new layer. And we're going to tap on it and we're going to clipping mask it. Now for a minute it's going to stay as normal, but eventually it's going to change to the overlay blend mode. Now we're going to go to our brush library and we're going to go to painting. We're going to go ahead and use the old brush. And we've got a couple of sizes. I've got a 6 and I've got a 2. Now we're going to roll with the 6. Now what this brush is going to do is this one's actually going to be the fine details of the water. So this is where we're going to add in real sort of streaky looks to it. It is going to be quite messy, and I want you to sort of really get really on board with that. We are going to sort of streak over the top of here. We're going to follow the flow that we've created before, and we're just going to get really messy, creating these lovely sort of streaks, and they're going to run into each other, they're going to flow, they're going to break up, they're going to just be the finer details. And if you've nailed your flow and you understand how it kind of moves along your surfaces, then you have nothing to worry about. I'm just following that curve that I created, that kind of flat ledge, and then I'm just letting this spill down. Again, try to do less is more at this stage. You can always come back to it and just following some of those beautiful shapes that we created and letting this fine water effect almost just streak its way down in towards that crashing water below. So we can just bring that down towards here, add in like a couple of patches. If you add in like a blob of paint, because this is a particular brush that has kind of the same principles as paint, you can just smudge it back out. Again, we're going to just imagine that this crashes through here, comes through, makes its way down like so. Now I'm also imagining that yes, there's a top layer that crashes over, but then I'm also going to sort of imagine that there's a couple of maybe a couple of vertical ones in here, but ultimately we just want to get that top surface of the water. So we're just trying to bring in that top surface of detail here. It's going to end up in the shade, so I don't want you to spend too much time in like this area here, for example. Just that top layer of water, and just look at the difference between these. Like that base layer really helps us, again, work out the flow of the water. We're going to come down, crashing down here. Up here can get a lot of love with sort of the color, because this area here is going to be in the light later on. And then you can just occasionally, if I zoom in, you can see like there's the odd tiny little sort of little scrape that where the water is just like flying out, crashing out. It's not a simple sort of stream. It's quite a volatile sort of push of flow of water. So you're kind of creating this whole like environment, this whole scene, and really dictating what type of waterfall is this. Is it a peaceful one that just naturally flows down, or does it get a little bit more aggressive and it's quite fast flowing? So as long as you get something like that, you'll end up with a beautiful starting point. And then we'll do the same over on this one too. So again, I'm going to start with my flat surface here. I'm going to just let those angles start to be dictated. I'm going to let that kind of come down, and then make sure you let that just break off, break down. Lovely stuff. And we'll go ahead and again, where I imagine it crashes down onto there, I'm just going to create like a little bit of an arc. You kind of just, again, following the lines that you've created already, and then just letting this paint just really fine up all the details in the water. It's a really beautiful brush for this. Come down here, we'll go past that point, we'll go all the way down towards the bottom. Keeping my pressure super, super light. If you press really firm with this brush, you end up with something like that. So you can see the difference. I'm just trying to keep it really light, because we want to build up the color. You want to be in control of it and really have a say as to what happens with it. If you're really light with it, you can just change it up. You can erase it essentially. With this type of brush, again, you can just smudge it out. That's looking awesome. And let's make our way back up the waterfall. So here I'm going to go down in a vertical fashion, and then maybe it hits like some rocks here and it's not even. You just create these little sort of curls, like a little curve, lovely like that. Just little curves, shows little sort of areas of splash and water. And again, we'll come down here. Lovely. Again, create those curls, little curls, and let that fall off. Ultimately, it does fall behind this rock, so we want to go right up to this ledge here. We want to really show that the waterfall's been hidden a little bit. Here again, we're going to kind of follow the same principles, little curls here and there, show it's nice and rough, and then the odd little one that just breaks off. Looks great, I love that. It looks so animated, it looks like it's moving. Lovely stuff. And then again, you can just like add in something in there just to add in a bit more detail. And then this one over here on the right, I'm just going to keep this like quite nice and vertical and quite streaky, like just run this up and down. Create some lovely, just straight lines in this one, keeping it really simple. I want this one to, again, like I said earlier, just be like an additional sort of waterfall with some little bit of additional detail over here. Again, this one's going to end up quite dark later on and hidden in the shadows when we add in the final shadow adjustments. So for now, we can enjoy it, but it will ultimately be taken away from us. Lovely stuff. And then at the bottom, we have to continue on the same principle. So you can start with the horizontal area down here if that's easiest. Go left to right, just adding in like lovely dashes in here and just little surface of the water. Again, this will be a sucker later on for our shadow spaces, so don't need to stress too much. Now I'm going to start with these ledges that make their way down before I sort of make this crashing look in here. So we can do lots of stuff. We can create little sort of flick outs here and there from this waterfall here at the bottom. And then again, just follow all of your lines that you've created. And I'm imagining again that crashes just here, like it really rolls round on us, falls off into here. And we'll create lovely little flicks and lovely little curls and lines. You don't want them to be too liney though. You don't want to have it all like straight line, straight line, straight line. You want to have lots and lots of like movement. So creating lots of these little curves and then that vertical fall off here in the water. You've got your base shape in between. So if you leave a gap, it's fine. The base layer underneath will fill out that space and still give the person looking at this the impression that it's water. It's just an area that's not got much light for whatever reason or flow, and maybe it calms down a little bit in that particular spot that you've left, like this little space here. And then let's just start to dictate this side as well. So I'm going to just start to push that water this way. I'm going to let that flow just kind of run out, and then as I get towards the bottom of here, I need to create little sort of crashing water, little sort of areas here and there that just flick out. You can make them bounce up in lots of different directions, but just push that flow that way. I'm going to bulk this area out here as if this ledge here is in front of it, like a little something like that. Pushing this in. Let's create some more sort of flicks and curls, and then as it gets behind there, you don't need to stress about that. That's going to ultimately disappear. And looking at that, it's got some really lovely flow to it. And then again down here, I'm going to go left to right because this will be quite a white area here because it's going to end up like really kind of, that break wave kind of look. And I'm going to just create lots of random little flicks and curls, and it will smudge the layers that you've already like drawn. So all those lines you've already drawn. If you go in like little sort of squiggles here, I'm just going in lots and lots of little squiggles, trying to create like a little break of water here. Break of water here, like little ripples, and then just as you get further away from sort of where they all crash down, just occasionally add in another one, just like another one here and another one there, like a little bit more of whiter water, and again just bring that down this way. So just occasionally like a little line here, push that across. Little area of white just to really show the flow again of water. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's just a similar sort of thing to like this whole process, talking about flow a lot and the water and how it all makes its way, along our landscape. Now that is that layer done with. We've added in all of those beautiful little details, and we're going to go to our layer and we're going to tap on the blend mode of it and just scroll down and change it to overlay, which is going to give it a bit more of a ghosty look. You're going to lose a little bit of sort of that fine white detail. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our layers and create another new layer and tap on it and clipping mask it also. And we're going to go ahead and change the blend mode again from normal to overlay straight away this time. And we're going to go to our colors. I'm going to grab the top color here in the fourth column, and we're now going to dictate sort of the brightest spots of our water. So for example, up here at the top, this is going to be quite a white area here, and you're going to kind of repeat the same process. Now we've still got the 6%. Occasionally in a moment you may want to think about dropping it to like a smaller size, but we're just brightening up certain areas here that we really want to show are nice and beautiful and bright. And the other layer that you created here now has created the texture in here, but this is like those final sort of white brighter areas. And we're going to go ahead and just sort of crack on with them and bring sort of the white down here and like here. But ultimately later on we may go back and hide them again. I know I keep talking about this dreaded shadow layer that's coming right at the end, but it dictates the final lighting and it will just hide a few of these brighter spots. If you end up doing too many now, it's not a problem. Now I'm making sure that the top of this waterfall here has got a lot of white to it and the beautiful brighter tones. And when I get into the smaller areas, I'm going to drop it down to 2% so I can create some real purposeful little sort of streaks and flow here. Just making sure that, again, that top surface is nice and bright. And maybe a little bit that runs in through here and another one here. A couple of extra spots on there, making that water just so white and beautiful. Then back to 6% now, and I'll just, maybe I'll streak in a little bit here. It's maybe getting a little bit of light reverb somehow, and it's maybe bringing a bit more down here as well. It doesn't all necessarily have to be about the lighting, but it's just showing those beautiful whiter spots of the water. And when we get down into here, I definitely want these sort of areas over here kind of following the same flow that I drew before. So I'm drawing on top of those paint lines, and here I'm really brightening up here. Again, in anticipation later on of our beautiful highlights that we're going to add in. So just here at the base of this one here, it's going to be really lovely and white. We're going to end up with some more curls and flicks, etc., just to try and really show how beautiful and white that crashing water is. I'll add in a few more on this top surface here, and as that rolls off, we can just push them as they roll off this edge, falling down into what is the the water below. And then a couple more sort of white streaks here, just on the end of the water in the crash zone underneath. Add in a little bit of white in here. It's slightly white, it's got a slight yellow hue to it. And then pushing in a little bit of white down here as well, just to vary up the water surface. And then this waterfall here, I do think that this would get a little bit of lighting, these ones here that crash out. So we'll add in a little bit on here too. We'll add in some lovely vertical lines in here over the crashing edge of here. So with a waterfall like this, you can really build up a lot of color and a lot of layers. It just takes a little bit of time to just get through that. But you're into the main part of this tutorial now, so you're locked in. Let's just add in a few sort of curly spots here to vary up that water, and then bring in those lovely bright lines, and maybe a little bit up here, but I don't want to go too far with it. And then over here on the right, maybe the odd sort of lighter streak again, just to add in more flow, make sure it does look like water. And I didn't really add quite a lot towards the top, so I'll just make sure that that does have like a nice water effect from the top. And now your water's got so much more color to it, more beautiful tones, a lot more build up. Now we're going to go ahead and add in some atmosphere down here, some additional points. So we're going to go ahead above these two ledges here that we created that stick out from our basic shape. We're going to create a new layer in front of it. And change the blend mode from normal. We're going to change it to the option of vivid light. And we're going to go to our colors and grab the top of the 5th column. Your brush then wants to be changed to elements and the clouds brush. Opacity is set to 80% and the size is set to about 10%. And just where the sort of water crashes into here, we're going to very lightly with our pressure just create some like areas of mist using the clouds brush. So just nice random areas of mist, and you can let that sort of fly out from the bottom here. It's going to, in some areas, make it really blue, and I don't mind that, but sort of less will be more, as always. Just try to keep it to a minimum to start with, and creating these lovely little sort of big early flicks up here. So big large flicks over here. Creating some lovely mist down here, especially at the base of the waterfall. We'll of course go along here as well, creating some in this area, just trying to add in a little bit of atmosphere. Lovely stuff. Along here, you can add in like a little bit that just runs a little bit astray of the actual waterfall. And along here as well, we'll just add in like a little bit that's bouncing up in behind here. Drag that up a tiny bit, like so. And then in the same brush collection, we're going to go ahead and change to driven snow. And these are just going to act as little areas of water. Now we've got 2 sizes, we've got 13 to start with. And this is just going to be like little water droplets that just push it in different directions. They're just splashing up for whatever reason. And you can do the odd sort of one in the waterfall if you want, just like tiny individual droplets, but little sort of areas here that are just bouncing up. Don't do too many with this brush size to start with, because again, we've got another one in a minute. Just a few little dashes through here in the base of the water here, most definitely, and then a couple that flick up from here, and again the odd sort of one that comes down it is also fine, just like a couple of droplets. And then over here in our little areas of like mist that we created. And then we'll change the brush size to the larger size of 44%. We've got some much larger ones, and this is going to act as like just some really large areas of sort of blobs of water. Now keep this to a minimum if you can, just a few sort of dashes here and there. It's going to be very, very large otherwise. So that's probably one too many. But over here we can definitely add some just down in this area because it's a bit closer to us. So we're now going to go ahead and we're going to add in the color to the rocks. So if we go to our layers, we've got this main shape here. I'm going to work on that first. So I'm going to create a new layer that's clipped to it, and it's going to be the bottom one out of the clip pile. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the top color here in the fourth column from the right. Your brush wants to be set back to painting and the turpentine brush. And we're going to basically follow the exact same principles as we did before with those back areas. So for example, up here, we're going to imagine though, if we grab our stencil guide right at the top and we bring that back in, you'll notice this big swoop. That is essentially where I'm kind of imagining that here is like the top surface. So everything up here is the top surface. And then everything below it is like fall off. It's like vertical rock. So if we go ahead and we can either leave that on or you can just remember it. If we go ahead and make sure our brush again is turpentine, and we're going to go ahead and just start coloring in this top surface here. And again, a similar fashion as we did before. So we're going to go bring in like a little bit of color here, push that around, and then I'm going to bring in like a big flat surface here that kind of swoops in, and then just a couple more extra little scuffs there, and then from there we can leave that and we can just create some sort of vertical fall off lines. So like where the rock is just making its way down. We'll get rid of some of this in a second. We're just going to go ahead and just create some big rocky areas that just fall off that edge, and you can create like a little bit of a curve here to kind of show, like a ledge that does drop all the way down, and we'll bring it down towards here as well, creating random little rocky areas, and maybe even just like that curves in towards the left a little bit more just to follow the rocky surface, and a couple of extra little touches like that. Then we're going to go ahead and grab our eraser and tap on our eraser, making sure it's a soft airbrush and airbrushing. And brush size is going to be about 3%. Just going to sort of blend out a few of these areas, make them a little bit more subtle. These ones here are not going to be in the light quite so much, so I can really get away with being quite aggressive really with the erasing here and just leaving little areas of residue of just showing the flow of the rock. I keep saying the word flow, I apologize, but little areas here to just show how the rock makes its way down. You can reduce the brush size down and make it a bit more sort of aggressive with like a 2% and just sort of cut through that, just leaving little bits of residue like this. And then you can always go back to your brush and maybe just reintroduce some more if you feel like, maybe I do need to just show a little bit more extra color in here. I'm just creating lovely little curves there just to kind of show a bit more of a fall off, and then a little bit of a fall off here as well. Now, another thing you can do is if you have done that first step and you're doing what I'm doing now, where we're just adding in some more on top, we can then also go back to our brush or eraser, tap on it and change it to painting and the turpentine. If you go for a slightly less size, maybe around about 8 or 7%, you can just erase through this and just like really break it down, keep less of it. But in certain areas, you may want to think about leaving it a little bit like sharper, a little bit more defined, a little bit like this. Create some more streaks. Now, once you've got kind of like this really messy kind of look like this, we just want to go to our smudge tool. Tap on our smudge tool and make sure it's still the medium brush under airbrushing. Opacity again is 70% and the size is 3. We're just going to go ahead and start to smudge these out. So we'll just blend them out, smudge them, break them down, make them a little bit softer in these areas here. They're not going to get quite as much love because we are going to add the sort of darker tone in a minute, but we're just going to try and just feather them out, break down some of the lines. You can maybe even smudge some of the areas together if you wish, like there, and just sort of running through it. And I'm just looking for some of the vertical lines just to take away some of their harshness down here. Give it a lovely sort of vertical look, but you can blend them together to create like a surface like that. And then here, got a large area that I'm going to have to just be a bit careful with, whereas I just blend it down and round over that little ledge there that we can kind of see. Blend that out, pushing that down, giving a little bit of a softer look to it. A little something like this. You just got just random rocky texture in there. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and tap on the layer. I'm going to go ahead and alpha lock it. We're going to go to our brush, making sure we switch it to airbrushing and the soft brush. And the color wants to be set to the middle color in the fourth column from the right. We're going to make the brush around about sort of 8% and just go left to right. And all of this ends up in the shadows. So literally down here, this ends up really, really dark. So once your rock starts to sort of fall off, like here, you can just darken this up. I'm imagining we'll give a little bit of light to this one, just a little bit. But then here, maybe I'll darken that up, maybe darken this area up on the left. And as it flows down, it gets into like a really dark brown color. And we lose quite a bit of it. Then we're going to go ahead and on the same layer, we're going to go to our eraser, tap on it and go to the stucco brush under painting. And at the top here, we're just going to very lightly just try and just sort of scrape in a few areas of sort of texture using this brush. So just the brush size is going to be set to about sort of 6 to 4% and just follow the flow of the lines you've already drawn, but then the occasional line that runs a little bit more of an angle and just try and just hack away at this. Not to the point where you erase too much of its color, but you're just hacking away at it, creating little extra areas of texture using the stucco brush. I love this brush for like creating rocky surfaces. And likewise, you can also then go over the top of some of these lines. If I zoom right in, you can just about see these sort of patching sort of shapes being eroded from this. And now what we're doing is somewhat sharpening it back up. So if I go up to about sort of a 6% here, by going over the top of all of these and just erasing, you're just now adding in a little bit more texture into here. So I'm going back over some of these lines, and if they are visible, they're just going to have a tiny bit of grain to them that just looks a bit more rocky, a bit more edgy, a bit more, you know, a bit more natural than this sort of swooping soft lines. So over here on the left, I'm just going to get rid of a little bit more of the lighting, bring in as much as that stucco brush as I can. A couple of little dashes like that look great because that just really breaks it up. So when you've got a large area, just use the brush, be brave, chop away into it and just leave little areas left over. Now we'll go ahead and basically continue that up here. So we'll go back to our brush, we'll change it back to painting in the option of turpentine. Color is going to be set to the top color in the fourth column from the right. So we're going to go back to our layer, it's alpha locked, so we're going to tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. And we're going to do the same up here that we did before. So with an 8% brush size, we're just going to somewhat create sort of all these little ledges. Do you know what? I might even go smaller than that. I might go down to the 3% brush size and I'll create some of these little ledges here, run them into each other. I'll do the same here, you know, create like a little bit of a ledge that runs up and then little areas of light, and you can go down that surface if you want to, you know, down that sort of edge of the line. A couple more areas here too. Keeping it nice and simple. All these little ledges. Don't want to add in too much up here because we've got the water obviously is the main feature, but we do want to sort of maybe run a few that just get like right close to it. So like a couple of streaks in there. I'm going to go up to the 8% up here and then just create again a nice big large area and then jump back down to the 3. Create some lines that all just link up to each other and these lovely sort of swooping lines. They're always my favorite. I love to create these long swooping lines. Just creates lots of ledges. And let's go ahead and we're not going to add in the darker brown too much on here. We are going to just jump straight to our eraser using that stucco brush. And we're going to just go over the top of it, try and break down some of the edges, you know, really reduce your brush size if you need to down to like 3% and like hack away into there. If you like it, by all means, please leave it. But, you know, we'll hack our way into here, creating more of a rocky surface, breaking that up. That's looking cool. Let's just break up into here. And all I'm doing is just trying to add in these tiny little sort of gloss overs of texture where it's less of a painting motion and it's more of like a real actual rocky surface. Now what we're going to do is we're also going to go back down to the base layer here. We're going to tap on it and we're going to alpha lock it so we can't paint outside of it. And then we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the color just beside it, which is the bottom of the 6th column. If we go to our brush and we go to airbrushing and the soft brush, we'll make the brush size around about 6, let's go bigger than that, let's go up to about 8, and we're just going to gloss over the top ledge here. What essentially we're doing now is just adding in a little bit of a lighter brown here in the areas that are in the light source. And just like here as well, we can add in a bit of brown here and then blend this down a little bit towards like the sort of more bluer tones towards the bottom. It will just help us later on with our lighting as well. A little bit of extra sort of colour there towards the top. Now, while we've still got that selected, we're going to go to our layers and we're going to go to this shape here, which is this ledge here that sticks out. We've got to repeat all of that. Now, if we tap on the layer first of all and we alpha lock it, and we do exactly what we just did just then, we'll go with a larger brush size, maybe about 13%. We'll just brighten up the top area with a light brown and then blend that down into the shape. So just blend down that lighter brown at the top surface and bring that down. We'll go to our layers and we'll create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the top color here of that 4th column from the right again. We'll go to our brush, painting, turpentine, and probably 5 or 8%, something around there, whatever you're happy with. We're going to add in the ledges up here. So I'm going to look at the shapes I've got. I've got a lovely big flat ledge here, so I can just maybe sort of bring in like a big area here of sort of flat surface, and then maybe a little one that runs into here, but ultimately it's like a little bit flatter up into this space. Just created all those lovely little sort of stepping stones. Another sort of ledge up here. Taking a look at that. That one's fine. Like how that looks. And then once you've got a few like this, you can then go ahead and maybe sort of drop your brush size down to about 3% and sort of artificially create some more. So like here, maybe just like create like a swoop, and then from the end of it, just sort of round it off and then push down with the brush, you know, creating like the edge of it, and then just let that sort of blend out at the bottom. So you're kind of creating like another little ledge within it. It doesn't have to be quite as sort of horizontal as that. You can make one like over here that's like a little bit sort of more of a swooping line, and then that runs down and then overtakes and steps in front of this one. So creating another little ledge. We're going to do all the same practices we did before. We're just trying to create like that little sort of rocky surface, little areas of bumps and lumps here. Maybe there's another one right behind it, and another one maybe here, just catching the light just a tiny bit. Maybe this one sort of creates a bit of a swooping line almost. Little variation in the shapes. And we'll make sure we get some nice vertical lines down here as well. So I'm going to create some lovely blocking shapes here, following the rocky surface all the way down towards the bottom. So it really falls off of these ledges here and then just goes all the way down. Quite a vertical cut in the rock. And here as well, maybe we really kind of give this one a good set of, you know, fall off here. That runs all the way. And then this one, I think this one's just going to have to sort of sit here, a little bit of a smaller one. We'll create some vertical lines that run off of here as well. Couple vertical in there, a couple more in there too. A couple of diagonal ones, if that's the flow of the rock, that's fine. A couple more sort of horizontal diagonal lines will look nice. It just changes up the flow. And then we'll go ahead and we'll grab our smudge tool, just like we did over here on the left. We want to start to think about, you know, blending out some of these lines, just sort of feathering them out a little bit, almost like they can't be seen. And so like, because they're down here, they're just really soft because the lighting is being distorted because we've got all this mist coming up. We're just going to blend in some of these, push this right up towards that edge of the rock maybe, and right up against it, push that over the top, smudging those two in. Smudging those in, smudging down, keeping it quite vertical, pushing down, up here. I quite like some of these looks up here, so I'm going to just sort of blend out a few of them, you know, push that out a little bit more here. This random curvy one, I'm definitely going to kind of just give it a little bit of a softer look to it. But I quite like some of those looks. Now what I am going to then do is we're going to go ahead and I'll jump straight to the stucco brush under the eraser. I want to add that texture in, so about sort of a 5% now. I'm just going to sort of run this up and down. This is where this brush is going to really come into its own, because here you're going to get such a large area to see those textures. And while you're here, we can then make our brush size like 3% and really dictate like this ledge here, this new one that we've sort of brought in. Let's separate it. Let's create a gap here. Let's get rid of some of those other streaks, and let's then show that this one has its own sort of set area of space, and then just continue to run that texture up and down, breaking up your lines, getting rid of certain areas if you don't want them anymore, but letting that brush really come in with that little bit of extra texture. Flat surface up here, run it across there, create some like more horizontal shapes if you need to, running that over the top of these as well. There, I ended up getting rid of quite a lot. I'm just going to leave it. Let's just see how it works out in the end. Again, here, I'm just going to go ahead and just make a slight alteration. I'm going to adjust this shape here of this ledge, for example. I'm just going to kind of get rid of this little area here. And then I'm also going to get rid of this area here too. Just making adjustments as we go. So this is more of just like a little short shelf almost. Short little shelf. It's just catching on some light. Erasing into there. Leaving like little areas of texture. I don't mind that at all. I do not mind that at all. Going over the top of some of these lines, breaking them up, bringing that across. Lovely stuff. And should end up with this kind of like stepping stone look again. Again, we're going to go to the layer, tap on it and alpha lock it. We're going to go to our colors and grab the middle color in that fourth column from the right. Your brush wants to be set back to airbrushing and the soft brush. And any size that you feel fits your area. So I've gone to 7 for me. I'm going to sort of blend up from the bottom here and bring in that sort of darker brown up towards these little ledges here. And on the sides that fall off, so I'm going to bring the brush size down to about 4%. On the sides that fall off, I'm going to bring in this darker brown, blending up. I'll add some into these areas here too. Just because they're at the top doesn't mean that they can't get any of this darker brown. So a little bit of darker brown in here. And I'm just sort of taking a look. Can I blend this out on the right by making that a little bit of a darker brown? I can indeed. I can add in some darker brown towards the back end of here. And you end up like leaving like a little bit of residue here. Maybe this is casting a shadow. So let's go ahead and just sort of block in a bit of a shadow where this one here is going to end up blocking that light. So we're thinking about our light source a bit more now. I'm going to take away a bit of this one too. Blend out that little line there. So you end up with something like that, and you've got these really cool little sort of stepping stones. And if you want to, you can go back to your eraser, you can go to airbrushing and the soft brush, about sort of 9%, and you can just sort of blend this out at the bottom a bit more as it runs down into towards the water. So it's totally up to you. It depends on what yours looks like ultimately, but just a little blend out at the bottom. Now we just need to repeat that here as well. So we're going to go to our layers. We can go ahead and you can pinch those two layers together if you want to save on your layers. But this shape here will create a new layer in front of it, tap on it and clipping mask it. Go to your colors and grab the top color in that fourth column again. Brush, painting, turpentine. Probably want to be about that 3 or 8% brush size because we've got such a small area here that we just want to kind of create these little flat surfaces where you can see them. So this is where your little ledges will really come into play. You know, creating some little sort of flick offs from here and a little bit towards the top, nothing too crazy. Again, we'll bring that to 8% where we want to maybe think about bringing in some sort of vertical lines here. Bringing that down. Bringing that down. You know, something like this. And 3%, we'll just create like another little ledge here. Drop that down to 8%. Create some more fall off from there, maybe like a couple extra little lines. I don't want to go too mad. I just want these little flat surfaces just like we did before. We'll go through the same process. We'll go to the smudge tool. It will be exactly the same as it was before. We haven't changed it. We're going to just feather out some of these lines, just smudging them together a little bit. Just occasionally just creates like a softer look. Blending out some of these lines towards the bottom. You can blend them together as well. Just breaking them down. I'm gonna definitely erase a little bit of this and this. Push down in here. Blend a few of the lines together maybe just to sort of block them in. Flick them up and outwards a little bit more at the top as well. I'll flick them ones out. Then we'll go ahead and we'll go to our eraser. We'll change it to painting and the stucco brush first of all. And we'll get rid of some of this. So we'll run that brush over. Let's go up to about sort of 7 or 8%. we'll run over the top, create that lovely rocky texture. It looks so great when that pulls off, like that really awesome effect. Reduce it down depending on the size of the area that you're working in. So I've gone to 4 here, for example, for this ledge. So it's totally up to you depending on the size of the area you're working in. I'll run this up and down here and then flick that up there too. Flick that over these ones. Some little extra details. And then we'll go ahead and we will go to the layer, we'll tap on it and we'll alpha lock it. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the middle color in that 4th column from the right. We'll go to our brush and change it to airbrushing and the soft brush. And we'll make that brush size about 3%. Again, it depends on the area you're working in. I'm just going to blend that up using the darker brown here. Blend that up into these areas here and blend it out on the edge on the right. Adding in a little bit of that darker brown on the edges, just leaving kind of like that couple little areas like there, and there, just that little bit brighter. Now, we're actually somewhat done now. It's just a matter of doing the lighting effects. So if we go to our layers, we're going to go right to the top. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here. It's the middle color in that 4th column. Your brush wants to be set to the soft brush under airbrushing. And we're going to fluctuate probably around about 6 to even a smaller size. But we're imagining, if I just draw in a solid line for you, that the light is coming through and it's going to hit this area here on this surface, not this rock, just this one back here. And then we're going to kind of like glide in some lines that make their way out in kind of these angles here. Now, one thing we do want to make sure, this is just for demonstration at the minute. If I was to just grab my airbrush for a moment and soft airbrush, we do not want to necessarily get in the way of this shape here. We want to imagine that the lighting's breaking in from behind it. Now, ultimately, we're going to be pressing a lot lighter than this anyway. So if you get a little bit of spillover, that's fine. But that's kind of the goal. We're going to bring in some lovely light rays. So let's clear that layer and let's do it for real. So let's go to our brush, soft airbrush. I'm gonna go with a 5 to start with, and I'm just gonna sort of just think about bringing in some streaks. And as I'm going, I'm maybe thinking about where I'm positioning them. I'm just bringing them in from just here, and I'm just gonna bring them in, and I'm just gonna vary up some of their weights. So some of them are a little bit brighter, some of them are a little bit shorter, but ultimately I want them to crash onto there. We'll then make our brush size about maybe 6% and bring in some lines that run away over here on the right hand side. Bringing that across, and then I don't want them to be too sort of streaky like that, so I'm going to go ahead and just in some of the gaps just sort of block in the color a bit more, bringing in that lovely big ray of light. And again, I want those lines to continue down onto this rock here, brightening up this surface. So I'm making sure that they kind of finish there and only there. And we'll go ahead and try to think about maybe bringing in that's a little bit more sort of vertical down, but ultimately just bringing that across. Now I made my brush size then about 8% just to feather it here. So you should end up with these fantastic little light rays that make their way across the screen like so. And then we'll go to the blend mode for it. We'll change the blend mode from normal and change it to overlay. Now you'll start to somewhat lose them, and in my practices I actually swiped it to the left and duplicated it until I had 3, and you should end up with something like this. We've got a much more sort of blatant light source. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to create another new layer. We're going to go and we're going to add in a little bokeh to this. So same color, we're going to go to our brush library. We're going to go to the option of luminance for you, and it's bokeh lights. The brush size is going to be set to 41%. Now I hate this brush, but I also love it at the same time. We're aiming to get a couple of like very light ones there, but just 2 over here on the right that are a little bit more prominent in yellow. Maybe even something like that. Now, if you get the size right, you can go to your selection tool and make sure color fill's turned off and just draw around them, create a selection and tap on the dot, and then grab your cursor and just sort of rotate them to the point where you like them, and maybe scale them up in size and just manipulate them until a point where you're happy with them. And I'm going to go ahead and leave them just there. If I make sure in my layers I grab it and drag that layer underneath my 3 layers of overlay light beams, they'll get a little bit of a brighter look to them. Now I mentioned earlier about dreaded shadows, so we're going to go to our layers, we're going to go ahead and create a new layer and just drag it underneath those bokeh lights that you just created there. Go to your colors and we'll go ahead and we'll grab this color here at the bottom of the 4th column. Our brush wants to be set to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. We're going to go ahead and make that around about 5%. And the first thing we'll do is we'll just sort of darken up in behind here. So we're going to kind of just darken up in behind this rock. reducing that brush size down to about sort of 3% and just sort of darkening up in behind there, just creating a bit more of a shadow. And we're just going to get into some areas where we want to take away some of the lighting. So for example, you may want to get into here and just like think about maybe taking away a little bit away from this waterfall. You know, you want to be very, very light with it. And if you like your work, please, please, please just leave it. But for me, I'm just going to like, I want to create some of these waterfalls that are just like here. If I take away a little bit of that, that one looks like it's very much in the shadows. Likewise, I want down here, I want to sort of darken up just here a little bit, adding in a bit of a shadow over to here. I want this one to be the brightest, that to be kind of the medium, and that to be quite dark there. And then at the top, you know, we'll take away a bit more here too. And I'm being very, very light with my pressure. I'm just trying to just take away a little bit, imagining that this area here is blocking a little bit of the lighting. So, you know, you can come across it. You can really come across it and take away some areas of that lighting. I'm going to go ahead and reduce that brush size down to about sort of 5% and get into here. And let's like, you know, break that down a tiny bit as well. I'm going to bring my brush to about 8% and darken up right down here at the edge of the frame. Like down here is not bright at all. We want all your focus to be on those beautiful beams that come through. Now, how much you do is totally up to you. The other things we need to do is there's just a couple of extra additions. If we go ahead and we go to our list, and I'm trying to find this rock here. So I'm going to grab that rock, 2 are there and the 1 is there. I'm going to tap on the group for it, or the layer, depending on what you did. Create a new layer. Go to your colors and grab this color here at the top of the 5th column. We're going to go ahead with a soft airbrush around about sort of 10%. I'm going to separate these two, probably a bit bigger, about 12. Just separate these 2 rocks by adding in like a little area of sort of like that mist coming up from the water, by just sort of bringing that into here a bit more. Just bringing that in there, separating those 2 with a little bit of mist. I'm then going to go ahead and lower some of the highlights down on there. Now, if you ended up compressing your layers down for those rocks, it's not a problem. All you'd need to do is, if you compressed your layers down, create a new layer and clip it, and then grab the base shape. So this one here, the base color, grab that color, drag and drop it into that layer. And then just go to your layers opacity, tap on it, and just bring that down a little bit. Like I want to bring it down to a point where those oranges are there, so about sort of 35%, but they're not as bright as here, you know. It's not getting any light, so therefore it can't be as bright as that one there. What you can then also do is, I mentioned about the waterfall, if we go back to our shadowy layer that we created, I can make sure that my color is again set to the bottom color in that 4th column. I'm at this point making final adjustments, but I'm going back to my airbrush and the soft brush, about sort of 5%, and maybe just sort of darken up in here, darken up just down into there, in behind those rocks, just kind of just darkening that area up where it's not quite getting some light in. Sometimes it's additional areas of contrast will really help your design come to life. I'm going to make an adjustment to my bokeh layer. I'm going to go to it. I'm going to change the blend mode from normal. I'm going to change it to add, and I'm going to drop the opacity down to 40%. I'm also going to go to my adjustments and gauge and blur that out just around about sort of a 4 to 5%. And I might even just grab them and just move them across a tiny bit. Now, just as another adjustment, we added the stucco and it looks really good, and I want to add it to these areas here. So if I go to my layers, this group here is the large rock. Now, if you made it one layer, again, it's not a problem. Just tap on the layer, create a new one, tap on it and clipping mask it. Or just like I've done, you add it into the stack. We want to go to our color and change it to the bottom left color in the palette. And your brush wants to be the stucco brush under painting, probably with a little bit of a larger size, about 13%. And now just sort of run this over the top, just creating sort of a bit more of a rocky surface, and just varying up some of those painting lines. We didn't add it here, but it looks like it would be a really beautiful addition. So I'm just trying to think about those final little touches. So I'm just going to bring that brush size down to maybe about 4% and get in there with a few purposeful little scrapes here and there, little angles where I can maybe just take away, adding in a bit more of a rocky look to it, just a very light amount of texture. I'm going to do the same here as well, so exactly the same. I will find that layer for those 2 rocks. Again, we can open up the group, or tap on the top layer or tap on the singular layer, create a new one, tap on it and clipping mask it. And again, just make that brush size quite large and just run over it, creating some texture. Now you kind of want to follow your lines a little bit, to be honest. You want to follow those swoops down, just trying to create some little areas of rocky texture in there, and break up some of them if needs be as well. Just a little extra something, just so it follows the continuity of the rest of the design. And if I now pinch with 2 fingers and go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. Massive pat on the back to you if you made it all the way through something like this. It's a little bit of a longer tutorial, lots of different techniques, but you end up with this beautiful, beautiful design. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. If you did, please drop a like down below. Drop a comment as well, letting me know what you thought about this type of tutorial. As always, please be sure to tag me in your finished creations on Instagram, and you can even share them with my community over on Discord. A massive shout out to my patrons who help make these videos possible. If you want to get your name featured in videos, but more importantly, get access to a catalogue of nearly 80 exclusive tutorials at the time of recording, with 3 more added every single month, the catalogue continues to grow. You can get early access to YouTube tutorials and sneak peeks of them way before they come out, so hit the link in the description down below. And if you like this tutorial here on YouTube, you'll probably like this one as well. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.